Hi, everybody. And hi, Gina. How are you?
Doing well. How's everybody doing today? Good? I had some coffee. I'm feeling good. Ready to go?
So, Gina and I had an opportunity to speak ahead of this about how the left brain fuels the right brain. And I think that this is going to be a really interesting conversation. And I think where I would love to start is if you wouldn't mind sharing your background, how you got into the marketing industry in the first place, and what kind of sparked your passion about understanding consumer behavior.
Yeah, so I got into marketing in a rather non-linear fashion. When I graduated from college, it was during the first recession of the aughts. I had a job lined up in marketing at an automobile company. I was laid off before I graduated, so I was like, I have this fancy degree, I have no job. I moved here jobless, and I found my way into the research and analytics field. And so while I thought I wanted to start off in this big, beautiful creative and advertising, I ended up in spreadsheets. Wasn't what I thought, but I think it was one of the most fortuitous moves that happened to me, because what I learned was, I learned the beauty of using data. I learned the beauty that numbers can help fuel creative. I learned the importance of observation and watching your consumer target to sort of uncover those unspoken nuggets of information, like an anthropologist. I always loved anthropology in college. I was a business major, but I was just fascinated by human behavior. And when I went to the business school at Michigan, one of my favorite classes was consumer behavior. I'm like, gosh, this is like psychology, but business. And I feel like I won't have people telling me their problems, which maybe is better. I think I will fare better in a more businessy sense. And so I picked marketing, but I didn't end up there, I think, in the fashion that I thought I would. So started off in analytics and data at IRI. I moved over to Pepsi, where I spent 11 years working first in analytics, data, and insights. Went over to the consumer side, where I got to watch athletes all the time. I was a 3-sport athlete, so it was like a dream to me to sit and watch athletes doing their thing and getting to do that for a job. And then moved over to marketing, where I managed our Propel business for a while, our Gatorade business eventually, both on the brand side, media and creative side. And then I moved to Red Bull for a couple of years, which was like, to me at the time, upside down world, because you have your Pepsi traditional equity tracking and M&M modeling, and things are done in a very organized way. And then I went to Red Bull, and it was like, what? This is content marketing. People are shooting people to the moon. There's a surfing team I don't understand. Does anybody know what's driving what? And you really got a sense for like what that special sauce is about when you go to somewhere like that. So it was such an awesome experience to be able to do it. Eventually, I wanted to do something different and got out of CPG, went to a startup, became the CMO of Tonal, so connected strength training, which was amazing. It was like a product I'd never seen. Like, it's AI magnets. It can tell how strong you are and set the weight, and it slowly pushes you up. You're like, oh my God, I'm deadlifting 100 pounds, what is happening? Which isn't a lot, but it's a lot for me, because the AI would push it up. And the problem we had there was, how the hell do I talk about this thing? It's like, there's no proxy to what this is. And so we spent a lot of time trying to understand how to communicate that. And then eventually I ended up at Drizly, which is where I am today, overseeing marketing, both B2B and B2C. And it's been really fun, kind of continuing on that tech journey, but then relying on my CPG roots.
So I love the journey because you've been in large, hulking organizations as well as startups and more challenger-oriented type brands. Keeping it with the PepsiCo, and it was cumulative 11 years over there, right? Talk a little bit about how your time with Gatorade, right, which was a category leader, 85% market share of the space. How are you learning more and understanding the customer more when obviously what you had done previously or what the brand has done previously was already right?
Yeah, I really resonated with a lot of what Sophia said, because there was a great truth to Gatorade, which is we knew our consumer really, really well. We knew them cold. And the way we did that was both quantitatively and qualitatively, as I mentioned. So I remember one of my first jobs at Gatorade was to run our equity tracker. And I got to it, there were 50 statements, and everybody was running around saying, it's not a cool brand anymore, we're not a cool brand, we lost 5 points, not a cool brand. I'm like, I don't know if that matters though. I mean, it certainly seems like we should be cool, but what matters? And what I learned from that, we did a driver's analysis, which told us quantitatively what drives consideration in the category, not just for our brand. And you learn things like athletes and being on the sidelines are very important to you. They give you a buffer to your competition. And so one could say that's a really big investment. Why is it worth it? Quantitatively, we knew it was worth it. And then you would go to the observation phase. We would go up to the northern suburbs and just sit on the sidelines and watch kids playing sports, which is weird, but we were pre-authorized to be there, to say. We would watch kids playing sports, and you could, one time this kid went up to his mom and said, "Mom, I want something to drink." And she's like, "Do you want a water or a Gatorade?" And we're all like, "Oh, what's he gonna ask for?" He's like, "Gatorade." And we're like, "Yeah, yes, for the Gatorade." And so we just really understood what the opportunities were. We learned that they were eating all sorts of things, candidly junk, right? Where you're like, how are you eating this? Well, you're 17 and you feel amazing when you wake up in the morning. Not like now, where it's like the moon needs to align, I need a perfect pillow, I need 20 hours of sleep to be able to compete in any way. And so what we found is, through that observation, is that they didn't think that what they put in their body, the nutrition and the fuel, was equal to their training or was equal to their cleats. And I will never forget it, because at the time we were working on a brief for a brand campaign, and we wrote the line, "They do not think that in equals on." And we need them to think that. And that led to our 10-year call to action, which is win from within. And we loved that because it was a double entendre of the internal drive you have, which, being a former athlete, I could totally resonate with. And a lot of people, not even if you've played sports, like you resonate with that internal drive, but then also you're not gonna be a Porsche and put unleaded fuel in it, right? You need to put the best fuel in your body. And so, as Sophie had mentioned before, that was really important for us to have as a true north, to judge all of our creative. And it really gave us all a collective gut to say, this is what we should be doing and this is what we shouldn't be doing. It was all through that process, starting in the left brain and then moving to the right.
So another thing that I find to be super interesting from our conversation was the fact that, you know, marketers tend to over-index on doing focus groups and surveys and data analysis, but maybe not as much emphasis is put on literal observation, right? What's your thoughts there and around how you've been able to lean into that side of the fence without necessarily setting up all of your thesis on how you want to reach these consumers based on data or people indicating what they want?
Yeah, data's great, obviously. I mean, again, I grew up in analytics. Well, I didn't plan on it, that's where I grew up. And I will say the observational piece is so important because there's a huge, what we call like say and do gap, right? People say they're gonna do one thing, and they do another. We'd be in focus groups in people's houses. Mom says, "Oh, I don't give my child sugar." And you go and look, and there's like Pop-Tarts in there. You're like, okay, sure, okay, fine. True with exercising as well. There's a big say-do gap. I say I want to exercise 3 times a week. Do I? And that was true in my time at Tonal too. We noticed that women were doing a ton of cardio, like so much cardio. So much cardio. Cardio's great. We love cardio. It's good for the heart. We need it. But why not strength training? And we learned at that time that women, through that observation, said, "I don't want to look bulky," which honestly, I had a pretty much all-female team at the time that were like, "Oh, that sucks. It makes us angry." Like, a societal pressure is making us not be as healthy as we possibly can be. And that led to the creative that we made with Serena Williams, which is called Strength Made Me. There is no better woman to embrace her strength than Serena Williams, who's been criticized for it. Like, what the hell? She's one of the best athletes ever lived. And so it's just one of those moments where we're like, that observation led to that light bulb that went on that led to the creative that we did, which is really fun. I really love that process. And then when you see it together, you're like, wow, it's really fulfilling, and why I love marketing.
Yeah, there's a quote that data scientists use, which is listen to your customers but don't believe them. And I think that that's absolutely right. Like, that's such an interesting insight. Okay, let's shift over to your current role over at Drizly. Here's some interesting data. Drizly, during the pandemic, had explosive growth in terms of revenue, something like 519% from, I think it was like September or end of 2019 to September of 2021. you all obviously understood your customer during that phase. Now that the world has shifted back to, normalcy in some degree, and consumer behaviors have changed, how has your understanding of that customer also shifted?
Yeah, when I say there's been a rapid shift in customer behavior in this particular moment, it's like head spinning how fast it's been. I mean, the term "what got you here won't get you there" is very true for a brand like Drizly. So obviously in the pandemic, and even when I started, it was very much about quick and convenient delivery. So get alcohol in 60 minutes or less, which is true during the pandemic. We didn't want to go out, we maybe didn't want to shop, and now we brought to you. Problem is, people can go out to the store now, right? You're competing with that ability to be able to do that, so you also need to adjust. And we've spent time understanding our consumer, and what we've learned is that we don't just need to focus on convenience, it's also about the occasions in which you are consuming alcohol. And so we did quantitative analysis, again, looking at the left brain. What are the occasions in which you imbibe, right? So there's parties, there's gifting for other people. There's different kinds of parties too. There's big ones, there's more small gatherings. Spent all the time sizing that up and then really dove into the motivators and barriers that people have for those. If you're gifting, some of your barriers are, I want to buy something nice for you, and I want to get you a nice bourbon. I don't know what that is and where to get it, right? So I want to send it to you. If you're hosting, I love to host, but it's a million things in your checklist. You have to check something off. So I think everyone can kind of say that makes sense, but the problem is you have to make that light bulb go off in people's heads. And that's not there quite yet. When you're hosting, why go to the store? Just have it delivered. You have enough to do already. And that's where we're at right now, is making that light bulb go off. We just launched a campaign called Hosting Handled, which is about hosting, obviously. And there's that utility that Drizly drives. But I think the fun part about really bringing home the creativity is put some interesting spin on that utility. And so we launched a party planner along with it, which gives you a theme for your party. Some of my favorite parties have been theme parties. I went to an Icelandic film director party, which was interesting, and just let everyone interpret what that meant. And it was really interesting to see. I was dressed in all white, I remember, and just some of the other people, I'm like, that's what you interpreted this as? I love it. I have a lot of British friends, so one time it was dress as your favorite British celebrity. I went as Scary Spice. But just again, so fun to see what everyone did. So we launched a generator that will give you a theme idea. So how can you wrap it up in a creative way to bring that utility to life that's fun and memorable?
Awesome. So we talked about understanding the customer, right? And at some point you have to activate on that customer and actually develop a strategy. But before we even get there, talk to me about at what point do you feel confident enough that you understand that customer for you to actually ship or launch or act? And then how did that change between an organization like Gatorade that probably has a ton of different hurdles for you to jump through in order to actually get something up and live? And how's it now at more of, it's not necessarily a startup anymore, right? Drizly got acquired by Uber, and it's a large business in itself, but comparatively a startup. What's your thoughts around at what point do you feel confident enough to be like, I've learned enough about my customer, and I'm going to start developing an activation strategy at this point, and here we go? Yeah,
I think when I think about the times that I've gone through that trajectory of gathering the left brain, observing in the right brain, these don't have to be multi-year processes or even a year. A lot of times as I've done this, it's been a few months. We're doing a sprint to understand the quant, do the observation, and I feel like you, even for a newer brand, can really start activating after that. You need to start acting and start making bold choices and putting them out into the world, making sure you have the measurement in place to iterate and improve. But I think the thing I always think about, it was one of my old leaders at Red Bull had said, don't die in beauty, right? You don't have to wait to get it perfect and wait for everything to be perfect. I think the challenge is when you work for a smaller brand, you have smaller budget, you don't have a million reps, right, to get it right. It's I got this one big campaign, I gotta nail it. Versus when you work for a larger brand, larger budget, you can do a lot of reps. You can say, it's okay if this doesn't quite resonate, I can learn from it and do something else. Positive on a smaller brand like Drizly, we have more agility. It's been very freeing after 11 years of Pepsi, you have to have your TV go all the way up to the CEO to approve to go out. At Drizly, like, we just kind of do it. We just go over there. Like, sometimes I'm like, I didn't know we were doing that. All right, great work, everybody. I totally know. But I think that's the beautiful part, is giving your teams the ability to act swiftly, to hop on trends, and just try it out. At Gatorade, we had a moment with Serena. Again, she's like my muse. I had just come back from maternity leave. She had just come back having her daughter. Our daughters are the same age. I laughed. Her daughter started walking way before my daughter did. I was like, I'm sorry, I have mediocre basketball skills and you are an amazing athlete. But at that time, everybody was in the news was saying, can she do it? Can she come back? I was like pissed, because I was also coming back. So I took it personally. I was like, screw this, of course. Being a mother means she can still go full speed if she wants to. And we turned around a commercial in 3 weeks using, just video that we already had of her. We had her mother VO the spot to her, and it was called Like a Mother. You came back like a mother. And I remember like reading the script, and I was like, yeah, came back like a mother. And when it came out, I was like, I love it. And we did that very fast and with agility. So I think you need to have that foundation, but then you need to act with speed and act boldly as well.
Love that. Okay, so activating in this day and age is vastly different than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago, right? We are, as consumers, in the most fragmented ecosystem in terms of media consumption in history. Here's a few stats. The average consumer is exposed, especially in urban environments, to 30,000 different forms of advertising on a daily basis. We, as modern humans, have developed a psychological defense mechanism. It's ad blindness. It's an incapability to retain what we just saw, and it's blurring right past us. Some stats will say 80 to 90% of everything that you see doesn't even reach your frontal, I'm not a brain scientist, but somewhere it's your frontal cortex, and it'll just go one ear out the other, right? And in order to grab someone's attention, you have roughly 400 milliseconds, right? So that's 2 flutters of a hummingbird's wings. How are you all thinking through actually commanding the attention of your target customer in this day and age, right? You have millennials, you have people of all sorts of different age groups, and then you have Gen Zers that are coming of age right now as well that fundamentally consume their world vastly different than everybody else. How do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I laughed when I watched the show Mad Men, because I was like, how easy must have that have been? Like, TV, print, and audio, radio, let's go. Like, easy. It's so different, and being a marketer is hard because I laugh. Maybe finance changes a lot. I don't know. I feel like the P&L is the P&L, accounting rule. We have to be on top of every trend that comes out, and I'm in my 40s and I'm on TikTok and I was on Be Real, and my friends are like, why are you on that? I'm like, I have to, it's part of my job. I need to know what's going on in these platforms and figure it out. I'm terrible at it, doesn't matter, I at least know what's going on. That's why it's harder, having spent many times at a younger brand like Gatorade. You're constantly having to try out new channels, trying to figure out what sticks. Drizly's very much in the millennial camp, which is a little nicer. It's weird now that millennials are like, older, because remember for many years it was the millennials and what do we do? Now they're a little older, so it's we have a little bit longer time to figure stuff out.
By the way, you said cranky but optimistic.
I'm an Xennial, so I am cranky but optimistic.
I really resonate with that.
Yeah, kind of curmudgeon-y, but also very optimistic about the future. It's a weird place to be. But again, going back to when you're thinking about how to surround somebody, that's what I always think of it like a person with nodes around them, right? So there's all these things that you can see and get eyeballs on, which is important. You want eyeballs, right? Because eyeballs kind of activate your lizard brain and say, this exists, right? And that's basically all that happens. And then you need to figure out what are the channels that are actually more engaging, right? Which are the ones that not every channel is the same. Some you're like, oh, interesting. We've all had that happen, and we learn that, we're learning that now at Drizly. We have things like Bevelk Insights, where we're talking to media partners, and that's where people are going when you're looking for a gift, right? It's like, need a gift, you Google it, you see an article about gifting, Drizly's in there, because we're a thought leader in this place. So sometimes it's not the obvious channel, which there's obviously digital channels are really important and those play an important role, but it's think about that full ecosystem and where those, more engaging or influential places are. And I think finally, using the opportunity to show up in an unexpected place in a creative way is really fun. And what I mean by that is in our unsubscribe email at Drizly, you get it, and it's this dog on a computer with glasses, and it's like, oh, he's so sad. Our email manager thought he was doing a good job. Do you really want to unsubscribe? And people tweet about it, they talk about it, and they say, I didn't unsubscribe because that damn email was so cute. It's just like so funny to have creativity show up in an unexpected way.
In regards to channel strategy, do you think that marketers are overly rigid in thinking of like, well, there's brand marketing and then there's commerce marketing, and it's thinking in terms of academic sense when in reality humans don't necessarily think in clean boxes like that? How do you think about developing that mix?
This is by far one of my biggest things that I'll die on a sword for, which is people are humans, we're not channels, right? We are humans who have feelings, and we are surrounded in the world by things. And so one thing I love about the experiences that I've had is both on a brand side, on an e-commerce side, on a media side, is you have to find the beautiful balance between all of that. A lot of times what happens is it's an organizational thing that causes the issue. You have a brand team over here, somebody else is managing the media, someone else is managing this, and a lot of times I think the most important thing you have to do is look at the organizational structure to figure out how you can bust that silo down. My team knows now, we've been doing that a lot, which is, I don't care if our CRM channel's firing off here, paid socials there, what are we doing? Let's get the symphony together. And that's been one of the fun things about moving to a DTC brand, is how much more coordinated that all needs to be. Because you don't have, I could have somebody just see Gatorade and Kroger, and it was nice because I could, okay, you can interact with the brand there. It's all digital now, so we have to be coordinated. We have to think through the funnel. What is the first thing I should tell you about my brand that intrigues you? What's the next thing that gives a motivator to learn more? And then finally, how do I remove a barrier at the end? So it's very important that you all think creative and channel together, and that's something that we're doing at Drizly as well, bringing it all together.
So you understand the customer, you activate the customer, then the third leg of the three-legged stool would be actually understanding if it had an impact, and was it effective? Did it drive the outcome you were looking for? And in our conversation, I thought this was so fascinating. There's an external understanding, or need for you to understand, did this actually resonate with my customer? And then there's an internal need for marketers to be able to prove and validate to the finance department and those that hold the budget to make sure that they actually get funded the way that they want their marketing vision to be funded with. How do you approach that? How are you, especially in this day and age where it's harder and harder for us because of privacy regulations and so on, to be able to understand effectiveness and efficacy? How are you approaching that?
Yeah, again, kind of growing up where I did, I do believe in the analytical tools, right? So when I started at Drizly, let's get an MMM model started. Let's look at multi-touch attribution. Let's get these very important analytical pieces together, because they are important to say, all right, from a perspective of how many impressions are we getting, what action are people taking, how is that flowing through the funnel, which channels are effective at doing what. So that's important. I think the challenge that happens is there's always a bad outcome of that, is what I call measurability bias, which is everything that gets measured gets funded, right? And the things that aren't, it's a lot trickier, particularly with brand building. So anything like in the old days, at least sports marketing is one of those that has a target on it. Because it's like, well, that's a lot of money. What's going on there? And you're like, okay. And that's where you have to do the internal education to your leadership team to take them through that data and the qualitative piece. Because in the past, again, knowing athletes are really important to Gatorade, you would hear people say it. The kids would say it. Yeah, Gatorade has the best athletes, right? That's important to me. For Drizly, we're a super fun brand. Our tonality is, you know, again, with the dog, like, that's the kind of fun stuff. It's been so fun moving from the seriousness of athletes and screaming in locker rooms to the fun of Drizly and just the things we get to do. And you often do have people say, well, isn't that a little bit too juvenile, you know? And you're like, well, Tom, sorry, anybody named Tom? It's always my proxy name. We actually have data that shows that quantitatively and qualitatively, that's a differentiator for us, and that's great. So let us be a little zany, let us be a little creative, and just trust the process. And that takes time, takes education. I think it takes an iterative approach of test and prove, but showing your work, and then you get a lot of confidence between the leadership team.
Love it. So we only got a couple minutes left. I thought we'd be able to get to questions, but I'm just gonna ask one last question. And that's gonna be this. So you've accumulated so much knowledge, so much understanding, so much philosophy around how you should understand your customer, activate your customer. If you could go back to a middle portion of your career, relative to where you are today, what would you go back and tell yourself from the guise of how you also can inspire marketers in the room as well to what you know today, what you wish you knew then?
Yeah, I think there were times in my career where I was wanting to be on the flashy thing, right? We had global teams that were flying all over the world and doing sexy commercials, and I was like, that looks like amazing. But the times when the universe kind of said otherwise were the times that I learned the most, right? So when I was in analytics, I was like, I don't know if this is exactly what I want my career to be, but it ended up being one of my superpowers. The other day I was talking to a data scientist, and I'm like, what are you gonna do with that regression analysis? How's the R squared going? I'm like, it's about all I can do, but I know enough to be dangerous to say, what is this all about? So I'd say the thing that I've learned, or I would tell myself, is use every one of those opportunities as a sponge, and it may not be exactly what you thought you'd be doing, but you're gonna learn something from it. And I learned something from every position I was in, whether it was sexy and what I thought I wanted to do, or a little bit more, as I call it, eating my vegetables kind of experience.
Love that. Guys, Gina Hardy, everybody.